The Effect of 9/11 and Its Memory on New York City by Luke Reeves. On September 11th, 2001, two planes crashed into the Twin Towers in New York City, New York. While these are the most remembered crashes of the event, there were actually 4 planes in total that were hijacked by the Islamic terrorist group Al-Qaeda. The third plane crashed into the Pentagon, while the fourth plane crashed into a field in Pennsylvania thanks to passengers thwarting the hijackers' plan. This became and remains the deadliest terror attack in the history of the United States. The September 11 attacks killed 2,996 people and injured over 6,000 others on the day they occurred, but many other cancer-related and respiratory deaths occurred later on due to the debris left by the attacks. While this event shook all of America to its core, there is no denying that New Yorkers, specifically in New York City, were the most adversely affected by the events. Because of this, it is important to analyze the effects of the event, as well as how the memory of those events changed New York City. New York City was changed in terms of its air travel, economy, as well as its people. After the terrorist attacks of September 11th, New York City, as well as the U.S. as a whole, began to function very differently than it ever had before. The city was forced to adapt to these radical circumstances that had taken the city by surprise. One of the ways New York City was changed by 9/11 was that air travel from then on was drastically altered. Air travel was not the only means of transportation that was impacted by 9/11, but it was certainly the most affected. Many subway systems had been destroyed or damaged by the crashing planes, but seeing as how the attacks occurred by use of airplanes, it is logical that these become associated with the attacks and that this market would suffer. The memory of 9/11 is largely connected to the aviation industry. Safety became very strongly emphasized as various measures were implemented in order to make sure people boarding airplanes are safe and will bring no danger to others on the plane. The Transportation Security Administration was created by the federal government just 2 months after the attacks to improve airplane security not only in New York, but across all of America.
The federal government took direct responsibility for aviation security, and the screeners are now federal employees. The training certainly has improved.
The TSA brings in strict new rules on what travelers can carry on planes. Airports start screening passengers with full body scanning machines.
Not only did the industry see changes in airport security, as we saw with the creation of the TSA, but there were also changes in how many people were flying. As Anthony Tyler notes in a document concerning the impacts of 9/11, quote, on September 10, 2001, U.S. airports handled 38,047 flights. On September 12th, they handled 252 commercial flights, end quote. This is staggeringly low. However, in just a couple weeks, the number of flights handled began to rise back to normal levels. That being said, the terror attacks of September 11th did impact the New York City economy in more ways than only air travel. New York City's economy was derailed by 9/11. With barely anyone flying immediately after the event, New York City's tourism died down, but there were many other factors that resulted in the damage to New York economy. Veronica Bistyuk notes these factors in an article, saying, quote, from an economic perspective, New York became the greatest victim of the crisis. The World Trade Center, where offices of numerous national and international companies were located, was destroyed. Some businesses went bankrupt. Many businesses had to be relocated within a short period of time, which created a lot of complications and consequently tremendous financial losses. Due to the destruction of the World Trade Center, offices of travel-related companies within the domestic tourism industry lost over $300 million US, end quote. While this shows how New York City was harmed, many people say New York saw an immediate decline in tourism, but an overall gain. So, while undoubtedly it was a terrible event that hurt New York City, the memory of 9/11 has actually brought them some greater levels of prosperity into the future. It has been over a decade since the memorial was established, and there are still visitors every year that make the trip to New York solely to see this site. While the tourists visiting might not have been too personally affected by 9/11, the residents of New York City were hugely hurt. Residents of New York were hurt in many ways. Many lost family members, jobs, peace of mind, and some lost their religious beliefs. People who said their religious beliefs were less important following the event were more likely to experience complicated grief, have major depression, and develop PTSD. PTSD arises from horrifying events like 9/11 and is relived through the memory of the event. There is a duality to the memory, though, because it is also the avenue to healing. People who are closer in proximity to the event have higher rates of PTSD. Therefore, it is logical that people of New York City were changed the most by the terror attacks of September 11th, 2001. As the memory of 9/11 continues to adapt, and New York City along with it, it is vital that our memory of the event is not obscured to the point where we have forgotten exactly how much of an impact it had on the country and the city that it took place in.